Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. And today, instead of our normal Sunday rebuild review where we look at a team that completely tore it down and had to build it back up the last 4 to 5 years, basically from scratch, we are going to be doing a retool review. I thought that would be fun. And the team that has been notably retooling the last couple years and pretty successfully so is the St. Louis Blues, because back in the 2022 season, even though they were a 109-point team, they yet again lost to the Colorado Avalanche in the playoffs, lost to them in 2021 as well. Then a really disappointing start to the 2022-2023 season, and they were at this inflection point. Do we re-sign Ryan O'Reilly and Tarasenko and think that this is just a fluke year, or do we pivot to that Robert Thomas, Jordan Kyrou next generation of St. Louis Blues and try to get younger? They, of course, pivoted to the more younger route. So today, we are doing the retool review on the St. Louis Blues. Yeah, I'm going to start it in the summer of 2022 because that is when Doug Armstrong decided to not extend Tarasenko and Ryan O'Reilly before that season and instead extend their younger players long term. That was kind of a sign of, oh, we're trying to get younger. We're going to see how this season goes. We might be selling heavy, and boy, did they eventually sell heavy. And if you've seen any of these videos before, if not, go watch them. But we do 4 different sectors of the retool/rebuild. That being, we're going to start with trades because there were so many trades in 2023, then drafting and developing, then signings and extensions, and then the actual on-ice results. And then we come to our overall retool grade. Oh yeah, starting the trades in the summer of 2022, they shipped out Ville Husseau's RFA rights to Detroit for a 2022 third-round pick. Ville Husso was a big reason why they were even a 109-point team to begin with, having a 25-7-6 record with a .919 save percentage in 40 career games. It was an absolute insanity run, but Armstrong, rightfully so, already paying Binnington $6 million, did not want to give a serious contract to Ville Husso and shipped him out to Detroit. Yeah, Ville Husso would get a 3-year deal at $4.75 million from the Detroit Red Wings, become the starter the following season, and struggle a decent amount and have an .894 over the duration of this contract. As for that third-round pick, the Blues would select Alex Koskimaki, a forward who wasn't trending amazingly in his first 2 years after being drafted, but this year made the jump to North America and in 63 AHL games had 34 points, so maybe a potential cheap depth option for them going forward. Then fast forward after a really disappointing start by the St. Louis Blues, a month out before the 2023 deadline, they start selling heavy, shipping out Vladimir Tarasenko and Nico Mikkola to the New York Rangers for, funny enough, Sammy Blais, a Dallas first-round pick, and a 2024 third-round pick. Vladimir Tarasenko is like a Mount Rushmore player for the St. Louis Blues, so this really was the indication that they were choosing to go the retool route to get younger, get faster, and they got a solid package for him as well as Mikkola getting that first, third, and Sammy Blais. As for the Rangers, Tarasenko and Mikkola were pretty solid for them. They did end up losing in the first round to the New Jersey Devils, and funny enough, Nico Mikkola, as soon as he went to the Florida Panthers in free agency, turned into a damn good second pair guy and crucial to their success the last 2 years. Dallas first round pick unfortunately became 29th overall because they did make the Western Conference Finals, but they selected Theo Lidstein, who this season solidified himself as a full-time SHLer. He's not some kind of like top 75 prospect in the NHL, but still pretty promising. Could be a good third pair guy, low-end second pair. As for that 2024 third round pick, it turned into Adam Dzeko, a 6'5" intriguing center who did not take a big jump in production this year in the WHL, kind of plateaued, but at that size is pretty interesting and could be something. Then they trade the captain Ryan O'Reilly for Adam Gaudette, a first, a second, and an Ottawa third-round pick to the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Leafs, Ryan O'Reilly did help them break their playoff series win drought, but then would dip the following season to Nashville. Go watch my Barry Trotz video that I posted 2 days ago. As for the picks that they got, that first overall became 25th overall, and they selected Otto Stenberg, who looked very promising after playing 23 SHL games in his draft year. Unfortunately, the production in the SHL never really came the following 2 seasons, but this year he did make the jump to the AHL and was just below a half a point per game. Second round pick was used on Lucas Fischer in the 2024 draft at 56th overall, a 6'3" defenseman that was a week away from being a 2025 draft eligible player, and he took a solid jump this year in production to 37 points in 55 games. Pretty nice little prospect there. Then lastly, that third round pick in 2023 became another World Juniors legend, Juraj Prokarczyk, who was very good in the USHL in 2024 and well over a point per game in the CHL this season. So overall, for their 2 cornerstone expiring unrestricted free agents, They got solid value. Are the prospects absolutely knocking out of the park? No, but they're all pretty promising, and they'll definitely get a lot of NHL games out of those guys. However, there was one 2023 deal that did not really go that well, as they traded Ivan Barbashev for Zachary Dean. Barbashev was a 27-year-old winger who was making near nothing at $2.25 million, a year removed from a 60-point season, and still around a half a point per game in 2023. So instead of maybe getting a package of picks, like a second and a fourth-round pick, I'm not going to act like he would have got a first-round pick, they opted for a prospect in Zachary Dean that was a late first-round pick in 2021, but had not really taken huge steps to QMJHL level. In his draft year +1, only 52 points in 47 games, and in that draft year +2, 70 in 50 games. Still very solid production, but not quite to what you expect as a first-round pick in your draft year +2 in the Q. And yeah, the 2024 season did not exactly go as planned, as he got 9 games at the NHL level, went scoreless, and only had 14 points in 49 games at the AHL level. Now, he isn't some solely skill guy that has to play in a top 6. Maybe he develops into a very good bottom 6er, but this was kind of a missed evaluation in terms of trading for a prospect. Meanwhile, Barbashev in the Vegas Golden Knights Stanley Cup run that season would have 18 points in 22 games and be a +14, and last season had 51 points in 70 games while only making $5 million. We fast forward now to the 2023 offseason, and after trading Tarasenko, Ryan O'Reilly, and Ivan Barbashev, I guess Armstrong thought they needed to bring in some kind of veteran presence within their top 9, so he gave up a 6th-round pick take on 50% of Kevin Hayes' contract, which had a cap hit of $3.57 million. Did not exactly work out, as Kevin Hayes had 29 points in 79 games. And then going to the next trade, he had to attach a 2nd-round pick to dump him off to Pittsburgh his final 2 years at $3.71 million. So the Kevin Hayes trade experience, was a total disaster. They paid a 2nd and a 6th-round pick for mediocre third-line production. Shortly after attaching a 2nd-round pick to dump Kevin Hayes, they then got a 3rd-round pick from the Ottawa Senators to take on the final 2 years of Matthew Joseph's contract at $2.95 million. Matthew Joseph, while not as productive offensively than Kevin Hayes, only having 14 points in 60 games last year, is far better suited for a bottom 6 role and was damn good defensively this season for the St. Louis Blues. And also in the summer of 2024, in order to give out the offer sheets to Broberg and Holloway that we'll talk about in the signings and extensions, they needed to get their own 2nd-round pick back from the Pittsburgh Penguins after they just dumped off Kevin Hayes. So in order to do that, they had to give up a 2nd-round pick in 2026, their own, as well as that Ottawa 3rd-round pick, and they got their 2026 pick back in 2025 and a Pittsburgh 2026 5th-round pick, so more fallout from the Kevin Hayes experience. Jump ahead to December of 2024, and after they start winning some games under Jim Montgomery, they decide to kind of take a chance on Cam Fowler, getting $2.5 million of his contract retained, so he's only at $4 million, and they get a 4th-round pick, and they only have to give up a 2nd-round pick and kind of a low-level defenseman prospect. He, as well as others, criticized this deal because I didn't really think Cam Fowler had much left in the tank after the last 3 to 4 years on bad Anaheim Ducks teams. He did not have that good of both analytics in production, and boy, were we wrong. Boy, did they work out together. They were straight up one of the best pairs for the rest of the season. Among the 74 pairs with at least 455 on 5 minutes, they ranked 6th in the NHL in goals percentage at 63.3%, outscoring opponents 31-18. And analytically, they were also very good as well, ranking 15th among those 74, alongside pairs like Makar and Tays, Hughes and Hronik. They were awesome. Cam Fowler would go on to have 36 points in 51 regular season games with the St. Louis Blues, and he would rank 5th in playoff points by a defenseman, despite getting eliminated in the 1st round, having 10 in 7 games. Will he be as productive next season and go for 55, 60 points? Probably not, but as long as he's mid-40s and okay defensively playing alongside Parayko, at $4 million, that is damn good value. And again, all they did was go from a 2nd-round pick to a 4th-round pick. Very, very good deal. The last trade we're going to go over is the one that happened this offseason when they traded away Zachary Bolduc to the Montreal Canadiens for Logan Mailloux. I understand positional fit-wise why you would do this. St. Louis definitely right now, and especially within their forward core, is definitely more forward heavy. If you didn't think Bull Duke was going to be a top 6 forward going forward, you maybe move off him now. But in my opinion, the talent gap between these two guys as 2021 draftees, it's not huge, but I definitely prefer Bull Duke. Considering, of course, Bull Duke is already a two-way, very physical winger that just had 19 goals, 17 assists, 36 points in 72 games at the NHL level. His game is very translatable. He'll probably have a very long career and successful career in Montreal. Meanwhile, Logan Mailloux is mostly an all offense, no defense. His defensive numbers at the NHL level were god-awful last season. Offensive defenseman, that is AHL point totals and production dropped a decent amount this season to just over half a point per game. So the overall trade grade, and trust me, I'm going to be more positive throughout the rest of this video, but I am going to go with a B-. They did okay on the Tarasenko and Ryan O'Reilly trades, getting first-round picks and other picks. The Barbashev deal was kind of a whiff because they opted for the prospect, evaluated the prospect after 2 years after getting drafted and missed on that. The Kevin Hayes experience was kind of a disaster overall, but they did bounce back on a reclamation project like a Cam Fowler. He was awesome. And then I'm not too hot on the Bull Duke for Mailloux swap, so it's a little bit underwhelming. It's not horrendous or anything like that. It's going to be a lot more positives the rest of the way. But I think for trades, that is kind of the clear weak link of this retool at this point. Okay, so now we're going to do our drafting and developing, and this is going to be a little bit different than some of the other ones we've done because Doug Armstrong has been the general manager for all of this, even before the timeline that we've been looking at, unlike a Kyle Davidson, unlike a Kent Hughes in Montreal. So we're still going to mainly base this on 2022 and on the drafting and developing. But considering he drafted these guys as well, we're also going to look at that starting in 2019. Nikita Alexandrov, already a point per game guy in the AHL. He's a 2019 draftee, 24 years old, soon to be 25 years old, but pretty solid value for the 62nd overall pick to be a point per game AHLer. Maybe can eventually crack the NHL roster. Jake Neighbors is a guy that really hit the ground running as a 2020 draftee. 2023 had 27 goals, 38 points, improved last season. That ain't no fluke. I didn't just get lucky with a bunch of puck luck, improved his assists, doubled up his assists, and going forward should be a very effective middle sixer for them. Matt Kessel, solid development there. Right-handed defenseman, 5th round. You're already getting NHL games out of him. You take that every day of the week. Moving on to 2021, Zachary Bolduc unfortunately got traded, but they developed him pretty damn well. He fell to 17th overall and then immediately just dominated the QMJHL at 99 points. I believe Patrick Waugh was his coach back then for the Quebec Remparts. And yeah, very, very good development, and I expect him to be a 50 to 60 point guy in Montreal. Very solid there pick. So in their first round picks, 2 for 2 right now. Simon Robertson doesn't really look like he's turning into much at this point. Going on to 2022, starting in this range that we've been looking at, Jimmy Snuggerud, awesome freshman year at Minnesota. That was, of course, the him, Cooley, and Nyes line, one of the best lines in college hockey history. Took a bit of a dip in production last season, as expected, when he wasn't playing with those guys, but bounced back, was one of the best players in college hockey. Wicked shot, productive at the NHL level, as well as even in the playoffs, had 4 points in 7 games. Calder dark horse this season. I think he can be a 25 goal, 30 to 35 assists, 60, maybe even 70 point guy one day. I don't have him within like my top 20, but I think he was within my 21 to 30. So that's looking damn good. This is going to be a big year for him. We've already talked about Koskimaki. Have a point per game in his draft year, +3. That's 73rd overall. You'll take that every day of the week. This guy not exactly panning out at this point, although he was pretty productive in the OHL the year prior, but at the AHL, adjusting to the pro game. I'm not going to try to pronounce this guy's name, but not much in the KHL going on there. Moving on to 2023, Dvorsky. Really liked this pick, and it's looking like it's going to be a good one, considering he was so productive. 0.75 points per game at the AHL level, dominated the OHL. Just a very good two-way player. And I think much like Snuggerud, maybe not a star, but a high-level, good top 6 forward going forward. Otto Stenberg, talked about him with the trades. Hopefully he can end up being an impact middle sixer. Jury's still out on him. Lindstein as well. Has the tools to be a pretty good defenseman. Quentin Burns, a defenseman, 6'2", pretty productive this year in the OHL. Maybe could be something. We've already talked about him. 67 points in 53 QMJHL games. It's 76th overall. You'll take that. Stonkel. around a point per game in the WHL. Okay, there. Paul Fisher, we'll talk about him when you talk about the offer sheets that happened with Edmonton. He was traded as a part of that, and he's been pretty productive at Notre Dame. That's a solid pick there. 2024, we're moving on to Adam Juracek. I didn't love this pick. I understand that they needed a right-handed defenseman. He's been very injury-prone the last 2 years. Like his brother, he has the tools to be something special. He just needs to stay healthy and developed properly. They also went with Colin Ralph, another kind of big defenseman. That is more of a defensive defenseman. Those points don't really tell the full story. I know some people hate when I go through this hockey DB, but like at the end of the day, that's just what we got to do for this part. Andre Kus, nothing much in Liga this season going on. Adam Jecko, talked about him before, around a point per game. A little bit of a bump in production, but not much. 6'5" though. They like their big boys. Thomas Mursic, 90 points in 65 WHL games this year for 113th overall. And then we move on to 2025. Justin Carbonneau, that was a damn good pick. I had him in like the 12 to 16 range. A lot of people had him in the same tiers like an Eklund, a Bear, a Radim Murtka, around that range. Very, very productive this year in the QMJHL. He was just best player available at that point, and they snagged him. The two other guys that I simply have to talk about when it comes to drafting and developing, we'll dive more so into them when it comes to signings and extensions. Philip Broberg, Dylan Holloway, both were barely cracking the Edmonton Oilers roster. They come in with proper development and proper opportunity from the St. Louis Blues. They became crucial, important pieces to a team that made the playoffs in 2025. So overall for drafting and developing, I'm going to go with an A. I like some of the picks like Snuggerud, Dvorsky, the actual development. Once these guys get to the NHL level, Neighbors has hit, Bolduc has hit. I believe that some other of their guys look pretty promising. They still have a top 9 to 15 prospect pool in the NHL. And again, Broberg and Holloway, who some people have just completely given up on, the fact that they immediately hit the ground running within the St. Louis Blues organization, they get an A overall. They're not picking that high. Their highest pick is 10th overall, but despite that, they've been able to assemble a pretty solid U24 core. Moving on to the signings and extensions, and we're starting off with maybe their best one, as they gave Robert Thomas an 8-year deal at $8.125 million in the summer of 2022. Fresh off a 77-point season in 72 games. They did not waste any time. He had another year left on his deal. They didn't want him to break out further, and he had another good season. He probably could have asked for more. And yeah, the last 2 years, the first 2 years of this deal, he's had 86 points in 82 games and then 81 points in 70 games. He ranks 10th in the NHL in assists the last 2 years, sandwiched between Jesper Bratt and Leon Draisaitl, one of the best playmaking and passing centers in the NHL, and they're paying him for his age 26 to 31 seasons the rest of the way. Low-end first-line money, soon-to-be high-end second-line money. It's one of the best deals in the entire NHL. The next deal that was signed on the same day was not quite as good, as they re-signed Nick Leddy on a 4-year deal at $4 million after previously trading for him a couple months prior, giving up Jake Wallman in a second-round pick. We don't have to talk about that further. But yeah, Nick Leddy, he did play pretty big minutes the first 2 years on this deal, around 21, 22 minutes. But then this season, he kind of got phased out after an early injury because Broberg really broke out on the left side, as well as trading for Cam Fowler. He ended up only having 5 points in 31 games this season, playing 18.40 a night. They ended up waiving him. San Jose eventually claimed him, thankfully, and they got off his final year at $4 million. So not some kind of disaster, but not a very good deal. Next deal that summer, a couple weeks later, they ended up giving Jordan Kyrou the exact same deal as Robert Thomas. 8 years, $8.125 million, committing to those two instead of Ryan O'Reilly and Vladimir Tarasenko. Kyrou had really been progressing well and broke out with the 75-point season. One of the fastest players in the NHL and has really developed his goal-scoring ability. The last couple of years have been around the mid-30 goals, 70-ish point pace, well worth $8.125, and as the salary cap goes up, this is going to be $1 to $2 million of surplus value, and especially the defensive side of his game has really progressed under Jim Montgomery. Very good deal. Not Robert Thomas level, but very good. Now, fast forward almost 2 years, there really wasn't anything of note in terms of signings and extensions until the Buchnevich 6-year deal at $8 million on July 2nd, 2024. Again, that was an extension. He still had 1 more year left on his contract, and when looking at it, it hasn't aged amazing. His first 2 years in St. Louis was like a point per game player, then kind of came back down to earth in that 2023-2024 season. And unfortunately, this year was more of the same. He's now 30 years old when this deal is kicking in. So it's fine. That is the going rate probably for a good second liner, low end first liner, but not as good as Thomas or Cairo. But now it's time to talk about the offer sheets. What you guys have been waiting for, the crown jewels of this retool, of course, being the Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway offer sheets. Up first, we'll start with Philip Broberg because this one was kind of a shocker, if we're going to be honest. 2 years, $4.58 million for a guy that had not been consistently in Edmonton's NHL lineup. He was very good in the AHL with 38 points in 49 games. But yeah, I like the idea of bringing in a young guy like Broberg. I thought that this contract the first 2 years was not going to be surplus value. In fact, negative value, but it made sense to go out and basically trade a second-round pick to bring in a guy in your organization in a pretty old defense core like St. Louis. But no, this guy came out of the gate absolutely firing, man on a mission, 12 points in his first 15 games and finished with 29 points in 68 games, the plus 21, playing 20 minutes and 30 seconds a night at age 23, being a plus 21. He was a very, very good second pair defenseman, 100%. He always had the skating. That was on full display. He ranked in the 96th percentile in terms of top speed and 92nd percentile in speed burst. And the defensive side of his game finally developed, as well as some playmaking, allowing for this breakout. Now heading into next season, $4.58 million seems reasonable, if not $1 to $2 million of surplus value, considering he might take yet another step. And in 2 to 3 years, he might take over for Cam Fowler as that top pair left-handed defenseman. As for that second round pick, it ended up going to the Edmonton Oilers, of course, and then they traded it in the Trent Frederick deal, and the Boston Bruins selected William Moore, who has some solid upside coming out of the U.S. National Team Development Program. And then the Dylan Holloway offer sheet, 2 years, $2.29 million. I assumed that Edmonton would keep him just because it was so low and not some kind of crazy term. They ended up not matching it, and this one, I think we all agreed, this had serious upside. Holloway was a year younger than Broberg, as well as being more of a frequent stay in the Edmonton Oilers roster and dominant AHL numbers the prior 2 seasons, being near point per game. Yeah, Holloway, after being stuck in the Edmonton Oilers bottom 6, where he had a lot of pressure on him, could not be creative because if he messed up, he'd get scratched, he'd get benched, ends up going to St. Louis's top 6 and completely balls out and is just able to flourish. His first season in St. Louis, he goes for 26 goals, 63 points in 77 games, and was an analytical darling, ranking 7th in Evolving Hockey's WAR stat and 28th in their expected WAR stat. Let me just say that stat it's not a perfect stat. I'm not trying to say that Dylan Holloway was the 7th or the 28th best player in the NHL last year. What is accurate is the line of him, Braden Shen, and Kyrou were damn good, having a 57.7 expected goals percentage and an outscoring opponents 29 to 14. Now the Blues have Holloway at $2.29 million next season. He's probably going to be worth 3x, maybe even 4x that. And if they want to do some kind of long-term extension, they could probably get him on a 6 to 8 year deal at $6 to $7 million. Third round pick for Edmonton became Tommy Lafreniere, who was just under point per game on a bad Cam Loops team last season. As I mentioned before, they also sent the third round pick in Paul Fisher, that Notre Dame defenseman, to the Edmonton Oilers to incentivize them to not match, or after they didn't match. A couple weeks into the 2024-2025 season, they extend Jake Neighbors on a 2-year deal at $3.75 million. Had that 27-goal rookie season, built on that to have 46 points the following year. Wish that they maybe win a little bit longer term, because now we know that he is a proven NHLer. But it is what it is. Good value for the next 2 years at $3.75 million. Fast forward to this offseason, and they gave backup Joel Hofer a 2-year deal at $3.4 million. This bridge I do like because it lines up perfectly when Binnington expires. He'll be 34 years old. Hofer will be 27 years old. Hofer was elite in the 2024 season with a 914. This year did take a step back, but was a 904. He's a proven legit backup that could take steps and be the eventual starter. And then in free agency, he signed 2 deals. Up first, Nick Bjugstad, a solid veteran bottom 6 forward on a 2-year deal at $1.75 million. You know what to expect from him. He'll be worth 1.75. Also, another very underrated deal. I usually hate most unrestricted free agency deals, but he signed Pia Suter on a 2-year deal at $4.125 million. This year had 25 goals, 21 assists for 46 points for the Vancouver Canucks, basically acting as their number 1 center at the end of the season. He had 26 points in their final 34 games, and he has been damn good defensively the last couple of years, ranking 22nd out of 282 forwards in terms of expected goals against per 60 last season, and 18th out of 322 the prior season. So yeah, got 2 veteran guys that are solid defensively for the next 2 seasons, sub $6 million until some of their prospects are ready to fully go. That is why, in part, I am going to be giving an A+ in terms of the signings and extensions. The Robert Thomas deal, one of the best deals that we have seen recently that is aging fantastic. Kairu's awesome. Letty's the one maybe blemish, but again, it's only 4 years and they somehow got out of that last year. I don't love the Buchnevich deal, but I think he's going to be a consistent 30 and 30 kind of guy. And then Broberg, Holloway, just so awesome bringing them in and immediately smashing expectations. Neighbors is going to be a $4.5 to $6 million player on those 2 years. Hoffer's deal is very good. And two, an unrestricted free agency signings in an unrestricted free agency period that I thought was mostly dog shit deals. Very good job by Doug Armstrong, and they get an A+. Now it's time for the final results section. How did the team perform on the ice? How did certain players perform? And to start out in 2022, 2023, got off to a brutal start, of course. Ended up selling Tarasenko and O'Reilly, finishing with 81 points. But there were some positives. Ended up getting the 10th overall pick, as well as Thomas and Kyrou proving that 2022 was no fluke and that they were legit good first liners and going to be well worth their contracts. The 2023-2024 season, after a slow start in firing Craig Berube, they proved that they were still a good team, going 30-19-5 under Drew Bannister. Robert Thomas yet again has a point per game season. Neighbors has 27 goals, and the future starts to look a little bit brighter. And then this season, they kind of have a similar start as the prior one, as they fire their coach early, Drew Bannister, after he goes 9-12-1, and hire Jim Montgomery, and under him they go 35-18-7, good for a 105-point pace. They end up making the playoffs off the back of their own streak, winning 12 straight games post Four Nations. Basically, everybody has like a career year, including Colton Parayko setting a career high in points at 36, despite only playing 64 games. But unfortunately, in gutting fashion, they lose to the Winnipeg Jets in Game 7. Shout out Cole Perfetti. In terms of the results grade, I'm going to go with an A-. I think that's fair. They bounced back in a big way after selling pretty heavily in 2023. Some of their young guys took up that production that was lost by Ryan O'Reilly, Tarasenko, and Barbashev to get back into the 90s. This year, a 4-point jump to 96 and making the playoffs. I'm not sure you can quite say like A or A+, considering they haven't won a playoff series yet, as well as the fact they didn't like completely tear it down in 2023. Yes, Tarasenko, Ryan O'Reilly, and Barbashev were important to that team, but it wasn't like a full tear down. They still had Robert Thomas, they still had Kyrou, they still had Parayko, they still had Jordan Binnington, but it's definitely good. Do not get me wrong. The fact that they sold and immediately got back into the mix, very good job. And next year, hopefully under Montgomery, they can yet again make the playoffs and maybe win a round. Also, sometimes I do talk about miscellaneous stuff, and the coaching hiring of Jim Montgomery definitely needs to be highlighted within this retool, considering they gave Bannister the full-time job after a very solid finish to the 2024 season, but then threw him in the trash as soon as Jim Montgomery became available. Was it a little bit of a dick move? Sure, but elite coaches like Jim Montgomery do not become available often, so you need to be hyper-aggressive. It helps that Bannister also was not doing a good job coaching the team, but the fact that they were so aggressive to go snag an elite coach, in my opinion, should have been a Jack Adams finalist last year. That was very good management by the St. Louis Blues. Oh yeah, here's where I landed on the St. Louis Blues' overall retool. I really like the drafting, developing. The signings, extensions have been awesome. Results have been very good as well. Trades we need to work on a little bit. When looking at St. Louis, once they traded Ryan O'Reilly and Tarasenko, I did not really believe in a retool. I thought that they should have kind of just tore it down at that point, but they thought they could build around Robert Thomas, build around Jordan Kyrou, and maintain a competitive team. And that's what happened. Do I know if they're going to turn into a legit contender in the Western Conference in the next 3 to 4 years? I still have my doubts, but I think that they're going to be a constant wildcard team battling for a wild card, and maybe potentially through depth, potentially go on a deep run. I'm not sure they're ever going to have like the true superstars to be a consistent contender. But hey, in 2019, although they did have an elite first line center, an elite winger in Tarasenko, a true number one defenseman in Pietrangelo, that team didn't have any top 15 players in the NHL. So yeah, they've done a good job, and especially in a smaller, non-traditional hockey market. They're not a Chicago, they're not a Montreal, for ownership to completely tear it down. That's a big ask. So they wanted to just maintain, be competitive, be a playoff team, and they've done a really good job at that by drafting and developing very well, by being able to get guys on very team-friendly deals. So when looking at this, as Doug Armstrong departs in about a year, Alex Steen is going to be the next general manager, the St. Louis Blues are in a very good spot. Heading into next year, should be 92 to 100 points, I'd probably say. They still have a top 8 to 15 prospect pool in the NHL. They still have a bunch of young guys on the roster, like Neighbors, like Holloway, like Broberg, that are only going to get better. Dvorsky and Snuggerud are going to debut this year. they've done a really good job. And I think for the next 6 to 7 years at least, until Robert Thomas falls out of his prime, they're going to be a good team. An above average team's good. There's still a lot of work to be done to get to that elite level, but we shall see if they do that. Let me know in the comments. What do you think about this Retool review? Was I too harsh? Was I too light on certain aspects? What other teams would you like to see in terms of a rebuild review, in terms of a Retool review? I absolutely love doing these videos and just diving into these teams. I'll be seeing you in the next one. Peace.